Hey there, just a heads up, this episode of the Judo Science Podcast was created with help from AI. Some of the voices you'll hear are synthetic, but the ideas come from real research and real judo.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the place where we turn massive stacks of research into actionable high-impact knowledge tailored just for you.
Today, we are tying the belt tight and diving deep into the literal physics of hitting the ground.
We're talking about the biomechanics of the judo breakfall, or as it's known, Ukemi.
It's the ultimate defensive maneuver, and for good reason. Judo is, it's famous for its throws, but the most essential skill is actually knowing how to fall safely.
And this isn't just a theoretical concern. The injury risk is historically pretty severe.
It really is.
That's our starting point. I mean, safety efforts in places like Japan have been successful since 2012, reducing the most catastrophic head injuries.
Things like acute subdural hematomas, yeah.
But the historical context is truly sobering.
It is. The risk of concussions, even now, is still a persistent concern.
Which is exactly why the focus on perfecting that defensive layer, the Ukemi, is just non-negotiable.
And there's a fascinating bit of history there. We all use the term Ukemi now for the safe falling motion.
Right.
But that wasn't formalized until 1931 in a training manual.
Right.
Before that, they just called it, falling or rolling.
So it's just a practical thing, not a formalized technique.
Exactly. And the founder of Judo, Master Kano, supposedly experimented with it himself.
Well, that's the level of commitment we're aiming for today. Our mission is to analyze the current research on Ukemi biomechanics, identify the specific danger zones, and find some practical research-backed ways to enhance safety for athletes at every level.
And we're going to focus on one insidious variable that often turns a routine throw into a serious risk.
Unexpectedness.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. If the goal is to execute the breakfall, why is being surprised such a huge danger? What's happening in the body when a throw is unexpected?
It really comes down to cognitive load and reaction time.
Okay.
When an opponent uses a feint, say, they pretend to attack forward with a shoulder throw, but then they suddenly switch and throw you backward with a kuchigari.
A leg reap, yeah.
That deception causes this moment of confusion. And that critical second of just processing what's happening, it delays your protective response.
So you start your Ukemi too late.
Exactly. And the risk to the head just spikes immediately.
This sounds like something researchers couldn't ethically test by, actually throwing people dangerously. So how did they model unexpectedness in a lab?
The study by Hayashi and his colleagues used a really clever setup. They brought in 55 male judokas and split them up.
Into novices and experts.
Right. Novices were white belts with less than a year of experience, and experts were black belts. And they had them across 3 age groups: junior high, senior high, and university.
And instead of throwing them,
they had them do backward breakfalls after being pushed by a device that applied a strong, constant force.
And to simulate that surprise element, they introduced a distraction. You mentioned a mental addition task, which sounds pretty wild. Doing math while being pushed.
It does, but it's smart. Because the risk in a feint isn't just physical surprise, it's that your cognitive preparation gets compromised.
Ah.
The math task just saturated their attention, simulating that cognitive delay you get from a feint, and then they measured the key outcome: maximum head angular acceleration.
Which is a gold standard for predicting brain injury risk, right?
That's the one.
So after testing all these different age and skill groups, which group was the most vulnerable when they were surprised?
This is the critical finding, the real aha moment of the research. Only one group showed a statistically significant difference in that head acceleration. The junior high school student judo novices.
Only them.
Only them. For that group, the effect was massive. Their head injury risk under unexpected conditions went up dramatically. All the other groups, even the junior high experts who are the same age, they handled the surprise just fine. No significant change in risk.
That is immediate, actionable information for any coach working with young athletes.
Absolutely.
The implication is crystal clear. Because junior high novices are at such an extremely high risk when surprised, coaches should absolutely avoid unexpected attacks, like feints, during their training.
You save the complex deception until that fundamental technique is rock solid. Now let's tackle the biggest myth in contact sports safety: neck strength.
Right. When we think about protecting the head during a big impact, the assumption is always that stronger neck muscles are the answer.
Exactly. We've all been told that a thick, strong neck helps immobilize the head, preventing that whiplash effect.
So the researchers must have looked at that. Did they find that bigger neck muscles actually reduce the impact?
They tested it explicitly. They measured cervical muscle strength, specifically, flexing the head forward, and compared it directly to the head acceleration data from the falls. And the results are genuinely surprising. They found no correlation whatsoever.
None.
None. Between an athlete's measured neck strength and their ability to mitigate that angular acceleration risk, not in any group.
Wait, so all those hours spent doing neck strengthening exercises, you're telling me that raw static strength is essentially useless for mitigating the acute impact risk in a breakfall?
That's what the data suggests. It completely reframes the issue.
So what is it then?
The critical difference between the novices and the experts isn't how strong they are, but how fast they are. The researchers propose the key is in the speed of contraction of those cervical muscles.
Ah, so it's not about how much weight you can move, but about the instantaneous timing.
Precisely. The experts, just from muscle memory and proficiency, can initiate that contraction in the split second they realize they're falling.
Stabilizing their head.
Exactly, preventing it from hitting the mat, or at least controlling the contact. It shifts the focus from pure weight training to maximizing that neuromuscular speed and reaction time.
And timing isn't just about speed, it's also about endurance. Which brings us to another non-strength factor that compromises safety: fatigue.
Fatigue is a massive issue. Another study found that after high-intensity exercise, head angular acceleration increased significantly.
Even though their necks weren't technically weaker.
That's the key. It happened even though the athlete's overall neck muscle strength had not decreased.
So being tired just ruins your technique.
It implies that physical fatigue severely compromises the execution and control of the Ukemi skill. It makes even well-trained athletes less safe simply because they're tired.
This is a huge takeaway. If your technique relies on split-second timing and fatigue degrades that timing, then coaches need to realize that rest periods aren't a luxury.
They are a fundamental safety mechanism.
Okay, so we know strength isn't the key, and timing is compromised by surprise and fatigue. Let's look at the pure physics. If you get the timing right, how effective is a proper Ukemi?
When it's done correctly, it's incredibly effective. If we just look at translational acceleration.
That's the linear force, right? The direct slam.
Exactly. A proper breakfall keeps the peak force very low, often maxing out around 10 Gs.
Which is miles below the standard concussion threshold.
Miles. That's usually set by the head injury criterion, or HIC, at around 250 Gs.
But we've learned that the most severe brain injuries, like TBIs and acute subdural hematomas, aren't just caused by the brain slamming forward linearly.
That's the key distinction, and it's why Ukemi is so vital. The HIC is often criticized because it tends to ignore rotational acceleration.
The twisting.
The twisting, and that's the force most strongly linked to the shearing and twisting of the brain that causes the most serious injuries.
Can you break that down? Why is rotation so much worse than a direct hit?
Well, think of your brain like a block of Jell-O. Linear acceleration is like pushing that block. It compresses, then it bounces back.
Okay.
Rotational acceleration is like taking that block of Jell-O and twisting it. That motion causes the different layers, the skull, the brain matter itself, to shear against each other. It's far more destructive to all the neural connections and blood vessels.
So can you give us an example of how dangerous that rotation can get if the Ukemi fails?
Absolutely. Researchers use sophisticated crash test dummies to simulate throws with no defensive action.
What'd they find?
A throw like Osotogari, the major outside reap, produced rotational acceleration peaking over 5,000 radians per second squared.
And the concussion limit is?
About 4,500, so it's significantly above that limit. The rotational force alone was catastrophic, even if the linear slam wasn't that extreme.
But when experts performed the breakfall correctly...
When experts applied Ukemi, those dangerous rotational values were dramatically reduced, falling safely below the concussion limit. It really highlights that Ukemi's primary life-saving function is stopping that rotational twist.
So, beyond just slapping the mat, what does the research say about the actual body position that makes a fall safe versus a bad one? What are the novices doing wrong kinematically?
You see really stark differences. Novices tend to show greater flexion in their hip, knee, and trunk angles. The researchers call it a kind of squat protective mechanism.
Which seems helpful if you're trying to catch yourself on the ground, but not so much when you're airborne.
It's totally counterintuitive. When you're thrown, that greater trunk flexion is actually dangerous because it amplifies the angular velocity. It makes you rotate faster.
Like a figure skater pulling their arms in to spin faster.
Exactly. The novice is effectively pulling their body in, increasing their speed of rotation right before they hit the ground. They're curled up like a shrimp.
And the experts are doing the opposite.
The experts maintain a much straighter trunk position, more like a rigid plank. And they show faster, greater knee extension throughout the whole motion. This whole body control prevents that dangerous rotational amplification.
Let's talk equipment for a second. Does using extra padding, like an undermat beneath a tatami, actually help?
This is a tricky one. It helps, but only partially, and it can give a false sense of security.
How so?
Studies found that an undermat did significantly reduce the translational acceleration for some throws.
So it softens the direct blow.
It softens the blow, but, and here's the crucial caveat, the undermat had no effect whatsoever on reducing the rotational acceleration.
So it doesn't stop the twist.
It does nothing to stop the twist. It means the standard undermat is a deficient shock absorber for the most dangerous forces.
So to synthesize this really fascinating, complex picture, we've identified 3 primary risk factors for a serious head injury in judo.
Right. Low technical proficiency.
The cognitive disruption of an unexpected attack.
Yeah, and physical fatigue.
And we should zoom out for a moment and remember the original context of Ukemi. We're talking about it in a competition setting, but the original intent was much broader.
It was. Master Kano believed Ukemi was a general safety mechanism for everyday life. To help reduce the consequences of any fall, whether you were being thrown or you just slipped on ice.
Which provides a really clear application path for this research outside of the dojo. This knowledge doesn't just benefit judo players.
Precisely. If we understand the biomechanics of a safe fall, these techniques could potentially be adapted and taught to the general population.
Maybe even reducing serious injuries from falls in the elderly, which is a huge public health concern.
It's a real possibility.
So for the coaches, the athletes, the parents listening right now, what are the immediate clinical takeaways?
First, coaches have to recognize that highest risk group, the younger, low proficiency novices. And they must rigorously avoid unexpected attacks, like feints in their early training. Second, since we know novices use that risky flexion pattern, that coaches have to focus relentlessly on encouraging a straight trunk and full body extension to fight that angular velocity.
And the third?
Appropriate rest periods are not optional. They're a non-negotiable safety tool because we know fatigue destroys that critical timing.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. It really proves that timing and technique far surpass brute strength when it comes to safety.
Right. Proper Ukemi works by minimizing that dangerous rotational twist.
And the key to survival isn't having the strongest neck, but having total body control and staying straight like a board.
And we solidified that unique danger of being taken by surprise, especially for those just starting out.
Which raises a critical final question for you to mull over. We learned today that neck strength doesn't correlate with reduced injury risk, but the speed of cervical muscle contraction and reaction time likely do. We also know fatigue severely compromises that timing. So if pure strength training isn't the key to safety and fatigue is an obstacle, how can coaches adapt standard breakfall training to specifically enhance the split-second reaction speed required to protect the head, even when an athlete is exhausted after a long, intense session?
Finding a way to train resilience into that defensive timing under duress. Well, that's the great challenge for future training methodology.
Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We hope you feel thoroughly informed and maybe a little inspired to think about the physics of falling. We'll see you next time.
Next time on the Judo Science Podcast, episode 33, Judo Ukemi, why Ozotogari is more dangerous for beginners